This is really awful. It's inedible. But I followed the recipe your mom taught me. So what? Everything you make tastes terrible, my sister-in-law said, and she dumped the dish I cooked into the sink. Meanwhile, my father-in-law, acting as if it had nothing to do with him, continued eating in silence. My mother-in-law was resting in her bedroom, and there was no one to help me. I cleaned up the dish my sister-in-law had thrown into the sink, while wishing that my husband would return from his business trip soon. My name is Jenna, and I'm a 24-year-old housewife. I met my husband, Levi, when we were working at the same company. We dated for a year before getting married, and I quit my job after we got married. We've been married for almost 3 years now. My husband is very kind, and we have fun together. Despite being in our 3rd year of marriage, we were still enjoying a newlywed-like, happy married life. However, one day we received a call from my father-in-law, saying that my mother-in-law had collapsed. My husband and I rushed to the hospital. My mother-in-law lay weakly in bed, with numerous tubes connected to her. The doctor informed us that she would need care at home after her discharge, and the news of my mother-in-law, who has been healthy till now, falling ill hit us hard. We immediately went to my in-laws' house and started discussing the future. What we discussed was who would take care of my mother-in-law. My sister-in-law has been living with my parents-in-law, so I assumed she would take care of her mother. However, my sister-in-law firmly refused. I'm not going to be her caregiver. My father-in-law has left all the housework to my mother-in-law, so he seemed to have already decided that caregiving was not his responsibility. They both glanced at me several times, talking tediously to see if anyone would volunteer. I was fed up with this conversation, so I decided to volunteer myself and said, "Then I'll do it." I had always loved my mother-in-law. When I visited my in-laws' house, when my mother-in-law was still healthy, she was incredibly kind, and even taught me her special recipes. We didn't have any mother and daughter-in-law issues that you often hear about in the world. For me, my mother-in-law was like a second mother, and we had a wonderful relationship. Therefore, I could not stand the way her biological family members tried to avoid taking care of her. When I expressed my feelings like this, my father-in-law's face lit up. "That would be great. Can you move in right away?" he asked. My husband looked worried and asked me, "Are you sure about this?" I smiled and replied, "It's okay. I owe a lot to your mom." And we started living with my in-laws at their house. I spent my days taking care of the house and my mother-in-law. She always expressed gratitude to me, but actually, the time I spent taking care of her was the most serene. The reason for this was that my sister-in-law would constantly harass me while I did household chores. She worked from home, so we often saw each other during the day. Every time she saw me, she'd demand, "Make me some tea or clean my room." She treated me like a maid, and glared at me with an annoyed expression when I was doing other chores. Furthermore, she would complain about the tiniest details of the housework I do. Do it properly, she would scold me. Whenever she criticized me, she would always add, "This is why high school graduates are useless." In the beginning, she gave me orders and insulted me, even when my mother-in-law was present, but my mother-in-law always came to my rescue, so she gradually started attacking me, only when my mother-in-law wasn't around. I immediately talked to my husband about it, and he reprimanded my sister-in-law. However, she showed no remorse. "I'm sorry. I can't help but speak up. I notice Jenna's flaws too much." My husband said, "If she says anything, please tell me right away." But she has been harassing me almost every day, and it was exhausting to report to him each incident one by one. I was troubled the most when my husband was away on business trips. Due to the nature of his job, he had to be away from home several times a month. Each time, my sister-in-law did something to harass me. "It's really terrible. How can you make something like this? I made it using the recipe your mom gave me. When you make it, everything tastes awful," she said, and threw away the dishes I cooked. Meanwhile, my father-in-law kept eating, without saying a word. My mother-in-law was resting in her bedroom, and there was no one to help me. I cleaned up the dishes my sister-in-law had thrown away in the sink, while hoping that my husband would return from his business trip soon. Why does my sister-in-law continue to harass me like this? What joy does she find in doing such things? I can't understand her way of thinking. Moreover, I'm annoyed by my father-in-law, who seems to be satisfied as long as he can eat. He doesn't seem to care at all about my mother-in-law's condition. He doesn't even enter her room to talk to her. When I put my mother-in-law in a wheelchair and brought her to the living room, my father-in-law hurriedly retreated to his room. My husband probably takes after my mother-in-law, while my sister-in-law is more like my father-in-law. Their personalities are complete opposites. I wondered why my mother-in-law married someone like my father-in-law. Such thoughts crossed my mind. But if they didn't get married, my husband wouldn't have been born, and I wouldn't have met him. While pondering this, my sister-in-law suddenly called my name. Wondering what she needed, I sat down on the chair as she instructed. Then, she said, "I'm getting married. There are people who want to marry someone with a personality like hers?" It might be a little bit too harsh to say that, but my sister-in-law getting married also meant she would be leaving this house. I couldn't help but smile at the thought. Perhaps she misunderstood. "Oh, are you so happy about my marriage?" she said while laughing, but she quickly returned to a serious expression and continued to talk. "So, next month, he's coming here to meet you. You better behave properly. If you mess up in any way, you might not be able to stay in this house," she threatened. I couldn't quite grasp what my sister-in-law was saying for a while. She dumped the responsibility of taking care of her mother on me, hasn't done any household chores, has been treating me like a maid, and she has been insulting me all the time. So when my sister-in-law said that, I heard something inside me break. I had endured her harassment patiently in the past to avoid any trouble, but I had reached my limit. I decided it was time to get back at her. One night, I happened to witness my sister-in-law chatting intimately with a man I don't know on the street. Seeing their behavior, I began to suspect. Is she cheating? So, I decided to hire a private investigator for the month leading up to the time my sister-in-law's fiancé visits us. During that month, I collected evidence of her harassment. I documented our daily life at home and her behavior when we were out, focusing on gathering decisive proof to expose her true nature. At the same time, the private investigator conducted an investigation into my sister-in-law's infidelity. One afternoon, before going shopping, I said to my sister-in-law, "Let's go together." She seemed momentarily taken aback, but quickly hid it, perhaps thinking that she can make me pay for everything, and she happily joined me. I put my phone in my pocket and secretly opened a voice recording app. We headed to a local supermarket. While shopping, my sister-in-law continuously hurled insulting words at me, trying to hurt me. I received cold glances from other customers. I took a deep breath and focused on controlling my anger. On top of that, my sister-in-law intentionally knocked products out of my hand, letting them scatter on the floor, and she grinned as she looked at the mess. In that moment, I aimed a camera on my phone and began recording her misdeeds. "This is your fault. You're responsible for this disgraceful situation. No one likes you anyway." My sister-in-law's words, shifting the blame onto me, were being recorded. We proceeded to the checkout counter and paid. All the while, my sister-in-law continued to glare at me with a condescending look. I waited for the moment when she looked away and ended the recording. I decided to document my sister-in-law's ongoing harassment as well. I had set up a few hidden cameras in several places around the house to do that, and I'd been checking the camera to see what was happening in the house. I had installed cameras, paying particular attention to places like the living room, kitchen, and my room, where there was a possibility of my sister-in-law entering. One morning, while I was getting ready to leave, my sister-in-law sneaked into my room. She opened my closet, examined each piece of clothing, selected my favorite dress, and she cut it into pieces with scissors. Later, she opened my cosmetics, spilled the contents, and scribbled on my mirror. Since this was all captured by the hidden camera, I saved it as evidence. Also, while I was cooking dinner, my sister-in-law secretly crept into the kitchen and intentionally poured a large amount of salt into the dish I was preparing, causing a dramatic change in taste. She left while laughing, and when we all sat down for dinner, she repeatedly said that I had made a terrible meal, trying to make me the laughingstock. However, this entire ordeal had also been recorded on hidden cameras. I watched the recording, and I felt anger as I saw her malicious smile captured on tape. Furthermore, when I was hanging laundry, my sister-in-law secretly smeared mud on my underwear and stuffed trash into my shoes to make them uncomfortable to wear. She was unaware that her actions were being captured by hidden cameras, and she was smiling contentedly. About a week before her fiancé's visit, I received the results from the private investigator. Anxiously, I opened the envelope, and there was a detailed report inside. The report contained a record of my sister-in-law's actions in chronological order, and there was an astonishing fact in it. There were pages with photos attached showing my sister-in-law and her lover kissing in a car, and the shots capturing that moment were shocking. Her expression was different from her usual self, and she was intertwining with the man while she appeared ecstatic. Additionally, the report contained multiple photos revealing different instances of infidelity on various dates and locations. The report also included a clear photo of my sister-in-law and her lover entering a hotel holding hands. From these pictures, I was convinced that they have an intimate relationship. In addition, we found out with the investigation that they have been meeting regularly, and they started the relationship over a few months ago. On top of that, there were records of calls and emails exchanged between her and her affair partner. These messages contained vivid expressions of affection between them, making it clear that my sister-in-law was betraying her fiancé. Additionally, there were discussions about their future together, revealing that my sister-in-law was two-timing. Armed with this evidence, I decided to wait for the day when her fiancé would visit and reveal the truth to him. The moment was approaching when all my patience and endurance would finally be rewarded. I promised myself that I would no longer give in to my sister-in-law's harassment. And then, it was the day of his visit. My sister-in-law, who usually appeared disheveled, underwent a complete transformation. She looked like a different person, with her well-done makeup and stylish attire. She said, "Please, come in," and led her fiancé into the living room. Her fiancé had a pleasant appearance, and he seemed like a nice person. Therefore, I couldn't help but think he was too good for my sister-in-law. I was preparing tea for everyone in the kitchen. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law introduced her fiancé to her father and informed her fiancé that her mother was lying down in her bedroom. After that, my sister-in-law started bad-mouthing me. "The woman in the kitchen right now is my brother's wife, but she's such a difficult person to deal with. Even though she's a stay-at-home wife, she doesn't do any housework properly, and she doesn't help with taking care of our mother either. That's why I have to do everything. She doesn't seem to understand that I'm working even though I am at home." She said those unbelievable words without hesitation. I brought the tea and placed it in front of everyone. Then, I stood in front of her fiancé and greeted. "I'm just a high school graduate and a useless housewife. Nice to meet you." "Oh, I'm sorry, she always tells me so." Her fiancé looked at my sister-in-law with a puzzled expression. She seemed agitated and said, "Wait, what are you talking about? Stop joking." In response to her angry outburst, her fiancé was even more surprised. "I'm always grateful to her. She orders me to prepare tea and clean her room every day, and she even complains about the smallest details of housework I do. On an even worse occasion, she threw away the dish I cooked in the sink. I've been taking care of her mother all by myself, too. But according to what she said earlier. Wait! Don't tell lies. Lies? Then listen to this. Saying that, I played back the evidence of harassment that I had been collecting with voice recorders and videos. While it was only a portion of the records, it was enough to expose my sister-in-law's true nature. To further prove my claims, I presented numerous photos and email exchanges as evidence of her infidelity, which I had collected, with the help of a private investigator, over the past month. As I showed them this evidence, I could see my sister-in-law's complexion turning worse. Her fiancé was in shock and couldn't find words. This is fabricated. I won't admit it. You'll keep finding excuses, won't you? Well, why don't we ask your mom directly? What are you talking about? Mom is sleeping right now. You want to wake her up unnecessarily? See, you understand now, right? A caregiver wouldn't treat a patient like this. At that moment, the living room door opened, and my husband brought my mother in a wheelchair. Huh, Mom? And why, Levi? You said you were on a business trip. What's the matter? Can't I be awake? It seems like you preferred it when Mom was sleeping. I had told my sister-in-law that my husband was still away on a business trip, but in reality, he was secretly waiting in my mother-in-law's bedroom. Together with my husband, we had been making a plan to expose my sister-in-law's true nature. Mom, who always takes care of you? My husband asked. Of course, it's Jenna. She always cares about me and helps with the housework. She's such a wonderful daughter-in-law. She replied. That's right. Then, has Alice ever done anything for you? No, she hasn't done anything for me. If anything, she avoids any interaction with me, and I think she sees me as a nuisance. And to think she's been cheating. I'm really disappointed in you. I wonder why you became like this. Mom, that's not. Upon my mother's statement, her fiancé's face contorted. My sister-in-law desperately tried to defend herself, but her fiancé asked, That's not what? Are you saying your mother is lying? Besides, aren't these photos and videos solid evidence? My sister-in-law couldn't say anything. I think it's impossible to have a healthy married life with someone who lies, badmouths others, and cheats. I'm sorry, but let's pretend this conversation never happened. We haven't even submitted any paperwork, and I doubt there will be any complicated procedures for a breakup. Well then, I'm leaving, her fiancé said, and left our family home. My sister-in-law cried out, wait, while sobbing, but her fiancé didn't look back, and left the house without turning around. My sister-in-law glared at me and yelled, It's your fault! Why are you blaming me? Then, my mother-in-law shouted, That's enough! When are you going to grow up? Someone with a personality like yours will just cause trouble for their partner when they get married. Recognize your faults and make changes. My sister-in-law seemed taken aback by her scolding and fell into silence. Then, my husband started talking, followed by my mother-in-law. We're going to move out of this house and cut ties with you and Dad. We can't live with you guys anymore, especially for Jenna's sake. Then who's going to take care of the house? My father-in-law asked. Just when I thought you finally spoke up, you're still only thinking about yourself. You two will have to figure it out. I'm leaving too. I've decided to live in a care facility. I don't want to be with people who are indifferent at the last moment of my life. Give me a divorce. My mother-in-law said, presenting the divorce papers to my father-in-law. I'll cover the expenses for Mom's care facility. So, Mom, Dad, you are strangers now. What? For the first time, my father-in-law realized his foolishness, but it was already too late. Since my mother-in-law refused to listen to him, my father-in-law reluctantly signed the divorce papers. After that, we left the family home and moved to an apartment near the care facility where my mother-in-law would stay. Nowadays, I occasionally visit my mother-in-law during the day, and we have enjoyable conversations. My mother-in-law seems to have made friends in the facility and seems much happier than when she was at her house. We haven't told my father-in-law and sister-in-law which care facility she's in, so she has been living peacefully without any unexpected visits. By the way, neither my father-in-law or sister-in-law can handle household chores, so their house is in disarray, and apparently, they argue every day. I heard this from a neighbor near the family home. Both of them have selfish personalities, so clashes were inevitable. My father-in-law has been feeling very uncomfortable at work because people started talking about the story behind his daughter's and her fiancé's breakup and the mistreatment they inflicted on me. He had always been the type of person who was all talk and incompetent. So he was relegated to a quiet position, struggling with the consequences of his own actions. It seemed like my sister-in-law was planning to marry her affair partner. We found it out afterward, but her affair partner had been dating her, without knowing she was two-timing him. We were able to prevent her affair partner from marrying her by telling him that she was in a relationship with him while engaged with somebody else, and also by showing him the evidence of my sister-in-law's harassment towards me through a private investigator. My sister-in-law has called me and sent me angry emails so many times, thinking that I had something to do with her affair partner suddenly dumping her, but I didn't respond to any of them because she brought it all upon herself. On the other hand, my husband and I have a child now, and my mother-in-law is delighted to spend time with her grandchild. My husband seems happy to be able to make his mother happy. I'm going to continue enjoying happy days as a family with my mother-in-law, my husband, and our newborn child.